Good. Good afternoon. We will start the side event and workshop, the health of South American, Atlantic, and Antarctic marine ecosystems in a post-pandemic world. At first, I want to thank the organization of the meeting for this opportunity. And I would also especially to thank Dr. Tony Saraiva. We will start I would also like to thank the speakers, the health of South America, dear friends that work together for several years. And I would like to the debaters that will contribute after the talks. So I will start with the first talk. I will introduce Dr. Evangelina Schwindt, Research Director of Instituto de Biologia de Organismos Marinos, de CONICET, de Puerto Madryn, in Argentina. Please, Evangelina.
Okay, thank you very much, Flavio. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see it? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Flavio, for this invitation to participate in this side event. I'm going to talk about invasive species, marine invasive species in the Southwestern Atlantic. So the first, okay. The IPBES Global Assessment, recently published about biodiversity and ecosystem services, released 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. They show that invasive species are among the 5 most direct drivers of change in nature with the largest impact on global impacts at global scale. The invasive species affect not only biodiversity, but also the economy and health. And they are a direct threat to human well-being. The numbers they showed are that invasive alien species increased in 70% since 1970 for 21 countries they assessed. But these data are mainly from habitat, from plants and vertebrates. However, marine and freshwater ecosystems have been greatly impacted by invasive species. In a recent study, we showed from 49 coastal marine, estuarine, and freshwater ecosystems. We studied a 50-year period between 1965 and 2015. That we showed that different areas are impacted by invasive, in different degrees, marine invasive species. As you can see, the Southwestern Atlantic is one of the top largest area with highest number of invasive species. And we found that every 8 days, a new species is detected in a different part of the world, every 8 days, during 50 years of period. A closer look in the South Atlantic different assessment, we show that there are many introduced species with a peak in during 2000s. That is where the assessment were published. For example, for Brazil, 2009, and for Argentina and Uruguay in 2002. In Argentina, we also found another peak of a number of introduced detected during the decade of 60s. And that's because the marine fouling studies were performed. So the more we study marine fouling communities, the more invasive species we can find. Last year, we update those data in Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay. And we found that in Argentina and Uruguay, we found 4.5 1.5 times more species than before, almost 2 decades. And in Brazil, 1.6 more species than a decade ago. And this is a result. Of course, we have no new tools, technologies for more taxonomic resolution, more exhaustive search in literature, more research effort in the field, but also new arrivals, new species to this area. So for example, in Brazil, most of the species are concentrated in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. And in Argentina, in the northern part of Argentina, Buenos Aires and northern Patagonia. And this is mainly because more researchers are there, more research effort, but also because the marine ports are in those parts of those big countries. As you can see, ships are the main vectors for transporting species through ballast water or fouling, and this is persistent across time. So in our study, we show that between 1965 and 2015, ships are either through ballast water or fouling are transporting species, and most of the species are introduced by these vectors. So what we know about Antarctica, not too much, because we don't have exhaustive samplings. There are few evidence of marine introduced species, but there are some marine introduced species. However, we know that around the world, there are more than 95,000 ships at this moment. So at this 95,000 ships are traveling from one place to another one. So our areas are more connected through tourism, trade, and research, especially for Antarctica. A recent study by Holland in Australia, they showed that at least 9 introduced species in Australia are able to be transported and survive and establish in East Antarctic. Some of the species with the present conditions and some others with the future climate change. And what about the West Antarctica, the more connected with the Southern South America? There are few studies, but I would like to show you one of them, the latest by Leila Cárdenas from Chile. They found the first mussel settlement of a non-native species. It's a Mytilus platensis, which is native from Atlantic. They found it in the South Shetland Islands. But what is interesting here is that the temperature between South Shetland Islands and the southern part of South America, the difference in subtidal is between 7 and 8 degrees only. But the intertidal sometimes is similar. So that is like a red for pay attention to the future invasions. But also they also found that there is a high connectivity, mainly by tourism, and but also scientific and other commercial military ships. So there's a high connectivity between Antarctica and the Southern South America, Chile and Argentina. The recent study by Meloni, they studied a research vessel of Argentina. They followed the vessel through 2 years before the dry docking. They sampled the vessel and they found 120 fouling organisms belong to 14 different vertical groups. Some of them are we don't know because we don't have samplings in Antarctica, but some of these species are able to establish in Antarctica. For example, in our study on the new assessment of invasive species of Argentina and Uruguay, we have many species in the southern Argentina, in Tierra del Fuego, Ushuaia, 12, 16, 15 introduced species that we don't know about the potential risk for Antarctica, considering the high connectivity. So, more exhaustive assessment of the present introduced species in Antarctica, potential invasions under different global change scenarios, we need a deep analysis of marine traffic. But the first approach, it will be preventive. So if we don't know, we need to work more on preventive measures for the Southern Ocean. So temperature is not a barrier anymore. So we don't have to think about temperature as a barrier. It's important, but it is, we have evidence in other parts that is not the only factor. So the high connectivity with Antarctica is important, and we have to pay attention more about future invasions. That's all from my side. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to my colleagues and students.
Thank you, Evangelina. I will introduce the next speaker, that is Dr. Andrés Masilla, Dean of Research of Universidade de Magallanes, de Punta Arenas, Chile. Please, Luca. Luca, o vídeo do Andrés, por favor.
Buenas tardes. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer la invitación del profesor Flavio Berches de la Universidad de Sao Paulo por invitarnos a participar en este foro que es sobre la salud de los ecosistemas, en este caso ecosistemas marinos del Océano Atlántico y Pacífico en escenarios post-pandémicos. Entonces mi presentación se basará sobre los riesgos y las amenazas que existen en los ecosistemas marinos, en este caso de la ecorregión subantártica de Magallanes y Antártica chilena. Como ustedes pueden ver, la localización de la región de Magallanes la sitúa en uno de los lugares más estratégicos en estos momentos para estudiar los efectos de los cambios climáticos globales. Es considerado un centinela para estudiar los efectos del calentamiento global, por ejemplo, o las especies que viven en estos lugares. Muchas especies endémicas son también consideradas centinelas, ¿cierto?, termómetros para ver los efectos de los cambios en estos lugares, principalmente en este caso, los ecosistemas marinos. Esta región es una de las últimas regiones más conservadas del planeta. Tiene un gran endemismo de especies marinas, de agua dulce, estuarinas, y es una de las regiones más próximas al continente antártico. Esta región no tiene réplicas latitudinales en el planeta, por lo tanto es un lugar sumamente vulnerable a los efectos, en este caso de los cambios globales o del calentamiento global en específico. Como nosotros vemos, entre Cabo de Hornos y la península antártica, nosotros tenemos la distancia más cerca, ¿cierto?, existente en el mundo entre ecorregiones subantárticas y el continente antártico. En esta región, en la ecorregión subantártica de Magallanes, existen especies que son muy icónicas, son especies muy importantes, como por ejemplo los bosques de kelps. Aquí en este caso nosotros vemos a la especie Macrocystis pirífera, que es una especie que es considerada un ingeniero ecosistémico, porque es importante para la conservación de la biodiversidad, ya que actúa como una especie de paraguas. En estos momentos, ¿cierto?, de escenarios de cambio global, también es muy importante porque secuestra el CO2 atmosférico y Sin embargo, también contribuye en la dispersión de especies. Algunas pueden ser inclusive especies invasoras. Por otro lado, también tiene aplicaciones. Es utilizado como biofertilizante en cultivos agrícolas, es utilizado como alimento para el cultivo de salmón, como alimento humano, como alimento para balones o como también como materia prima para extracción de alginatos. Otra especie muy importante en la ecorregión subantártica de Magallanes es el cochayuyo, conocida científicamente como Turbelea antártica. Es una especie muy importante en la dieta, sobre todo de pueblos originarios, ¿cierto? Y es muy saludable debido a sus contenidos de yodo, sales minerales, etcétera, muchos macronutrientes, pero también es un antioxidante bastante reconocido y por lo tanto podría ser utilizado en la biomedicina, por ejemplo. Sin embargo, también la región está expuesta, ¿cierto?, a muchos riesgos. Estamos hablando de una región que es un laboratorio natural, por un lado, que tiene un alto porcentaje de endemismo, que está muy próximo a la Antártica. Sin embargo, hoy día, debido a los problemas existentes con la salmonicultura en Chiloé, que está más o menos a 2.000 kilómetros al norte de Punta Arenas, estos centros se han desplazado hacia la región de Magallanes y por lo tanto nosotros manifestamos nuestra preocupación con la salud de los ecosistemas marinos cuando nosotros introducimos especies exóticas tan agresivas como por ejemplo el salmón, pero también, ¿cierto?, con otros servicios aledaños, ¿cierto?, directamente relacionados con esta industria que tiene que ver con la alimentación, tiene que ver con el uso de fármacos. En estas publicaciones nosotros vemos que cómo es afectada la biodiversidad del fondo marino en los lugares cercanos a los centros de cultivo de salmones. Por otro lado, ¿cierto?, nosotros vemos que cada vez más se intensiva el uso de estos ecosistemas prístinos, principalmente en las regiones de fiordos y canales, con una gran carga, ¿cierto?, de nitrógeno y de fósforo, que sin duda va a alterar, ¿cierto?, la pristinidad de las aguas existentes en esta región. También es importante mencionar la contaminación que se genera. Generalmente los centros de cultivo de salmones utilizan mucho plástico y muchos flotadores y generalmente, como son privados, cuando las condiciones del lugar ya no son propicias para desarrollar un cultivo de salmones exitoso, lo más exitoso que se pueda, en el corto tiempo, lo más barato es dejar todos los desechos, ¿cierto?, todo lo que es plástico, etcétera, abandonado, y finalmente eso termina por generar una serie de trastornos, tanto visuales como también en la columna de agua, porque como ustedes todos saben, este plástico comienza a desintegrarse, con un riesgo, ¿cierto?, para toda la biodiversidad que existe en el lugar. El aumento de la basura flotante es sumamente considerable, sumamente significativa en fiordos y canales que son bastante prístinos todavía. Otro problema, ¿cierto?, que existe en estos lugares es el exceso uso indiscriminado de antibióticos, que va provocando efectos a lo largo del tiempo. Muchas enfermedades se tornan resistentes por el indiscriminado uso de antibióticos, ¿cierto? Y por lo tanto esto trae costos asociados que no están siendo considerados y por lo tanto muchas veces se producen grandes pérdidas también porque no existe una visión de un uso sustentable o de un manejo sustentable de estos cultivos que son bastante agresivos con el ambiente, sobre todo en una región prístina como las que les acabo de mencionar. Otro problema, ¿cierto?, que nosotros hemos detectado, las liberaciones, los escapes de salmones que ocurren, ¿cierto?, por condiciones por malas condiciones en los cultivos o por condiciones climáticas adversas. Entonces existen escapes de millones de salmones que afectan la comunidad, las comunidades de recursos o biodiversidad en general, ocasionando también daños a nivel de población humana, porque muchas de estas especies cuando escapan aún están en procesos de crecimiento y muchos en fases de vacunación. Entonces estos antibióticos muchas veces, ¿cierto?, son introducidos en la dieta accidentalmente de los lugareños, de los lugares, ¿cierto?, aledaños a donde han ocurrido estos escapes de salmón. Obviamente que el efecto sobre la fauna, principalmente peces, asociadas a estos centros de cultivos, es terrible porque ustedes saben la agresividad, ¿cierto?, de los salmones que acaban afectando la biodiversidad del lugar. Otro tema, ¿cierto?, importante de mencionar es la presencia de especies exóticas. La ecorregión subantártica no está ausente a ello, y aquí nosotros vemos el caso del bisón, donde especies que son marino-terrestre afectan por igual a ambos ecosistemas. En este caso, un bisón capturando un congrio en el intermareal, son muy agresivos y por lo tanto el impacto del bisón no solamente ocurre con las aves en el bosque. No olvidar que en Puerto Williams, en Isla Navarino, los bisones, las aves, muchas de ellas nidifican por ausencia de cazadores naturales, nidifican en el suelo. Entonces, estas especies invasoras como el bisón no solamente afectan los ecosistemas terrestres, sino que también los ecosistemas marinos. No puedo dejar, ¿cierto?, de mencionar las invasiones que nosotros hemos reportado de macroalgas invasoras y cómo desde Magallanes también podrían, a través de rafting, por ejemplo, o a través de cruceros, poder llegar hacia la Antártica. Obviamente que esos estudios deben ser desarrollados en forma permanente, debe haber un seguimiento permanente para que no existan esos riesgos de efectos en la biodiversidad local. Otro de los resultados que quiero mostrarles también de nuestro trabajo a largo plazo es el recientemente creado Parque Marino Diego Ramírez Paso Drake, ¿cierto? Este es un parque que se extiende desde el Cabo de Hornos hasta la latitud 59.9, casi llegando, ¿cierto?, a lo que es ya el continente antártico, y donde en estos momentos estamos desarrollando un plan de gestión y administración, donde existen objetos de conservación. Creemos que este es un lugar sumamente importante de transición subantártica, antártica o viceversa. Es el extremo sur de distribución de los grandes bosques de kelp, pero también aquí se desarrollan importantes procesos reproductivos de especies claves como por ejemplo el bacalao. El Parque Marino Diego Ramírez Paso Drake, unido a la Reserva de la Biosfera Cabo de Hornos, desde el Canal de Beagle hasta el Cabo de Hornos, ¿cierto?, permite resguardar una importante área marino-terrestre en Chile y, por lo tanto, desarrollar educación, conservación y también desarrollo sostenible con la pesca industrial y la pesca artesanal, pensando siempre en que estos laboratorios son laboratorios únicos y nos permiten desarrollar conocimiento que permitan resguardar en el fondo lo que existe en estos lugares. Otro trabajo importante es la red de sitios de estudios a largo plazo que nosotros ya llevamos desarrollando más de una década. Y aquí nosotros tenemos una red de sitios de estudios a largo plazo que incorpora las Islas Diego Ramírez, que incorpora el Cabo de Hornos, que incorpora Puerto Williams y que incorpora también Yendegaya, que es un lugar, ¿cierto?, que se está abriendo y que va a ser el punto de comunicación entre Yendegaya y Puerto Navarino, y por lo tanto nosotros creemos que este es un lugar que va a ser muy impactado en el futuro próximo y por lo tanto esta es una estación también de monitoreo de nuestra red de sitios de estudios a largo plazo denominada Cabo de Hornos. Esta red de sitios de estudios a largo plazo también está comunicada con la red chilena de estudios de sitios de estudio a largo plazo y con la red internacional. De esta forma nosotros tenemos un monitoreo, un seguimiento y una evaluación constante de los efectos que puedan estarse produciendo en estos ecosistemas que son prístinos a través de un plan de administración que tiene varias fases. Aquí ustedes ven el diagrama, un programa de administración que tiene un plan de vigilancia y fiscalización, investigación, manejo, extensión, monitoreo. Y además, el estudio, ¿cierto?, que estamos llevando a cabo, viendo el efecto del retroceso glaciar en la biodiversidad de estos lugares. Nosotros estamos abordando algunas áreas donde es evidente el retroceso glaciar en comparación con otras sin influencia glaciar, considerando la ecorregión subantártica de Magallanes y también el continente antártico, desde la península antártica hasta Bahía Margarita, que es dentro del círculo polar antártico. Por lo tanto, nosotros creemos que esta región es una región muy relevante en estos tiempos de escenarios de cambios climáticos globales. Es una región que presenta elevados endemismos de especies que presentan su límite de distribución subantártica y otras límite norte de distribución antártica o sur de distribución subantártica. Son grandes kelp que en estos momentos son importantes para el secuestro de CO2. Es una región muy llamativa para el turismo, pero también es una región muy vulnerable a riesgos tales como la salmonicultura, tales como la presencia de especies invasoras y también, ¿cierto?, el riesgo en la toma de decisiones por las autoridades que están gobernando, sean estas locales o nacionales. Es importante, ¿cierto?, el trabajo que nosotros tenemos que realizar en red, tal como lo estamos haciendo en este momento. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Andrés. And now I want to introduce Dr. Alvaro Carranza from the University de la República Montevideo, Uruguay. Alvaro, please.
Okay. ¿Ya está? Well, good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I will be presenting a brief overview of diversity and conservation of marine habitats in Uruguay. I will focus on a brief description of biodiversity of the area and relationship with shore morphology and oceanographic features. I will be talking also what is the expected or estimated current status of marine biodiversity in Uruguay. And briefly, I will be also commenting what we are doing in order to manage the marine ecosystems in Uruguay. I have some troubles with duplicated audio here. Okay, and finally, a brief prospect or direction for future actions concerning marine biodiversity conservation. Well, first, the Uruguayan marine ecosystem are located in a transition zone between temperate subtropical and subantarctic waters. You can see in this sea surface temperature map the confluence of water masses from warmer regions in the north and the subantarctic waters to the south. Uruguay is also located within the Patagonian Shelf, large marine ecoregion, in one of the main biogeographic schemes utilized currently. But we can also look at the marine ecoregion of the world framework. And in this scheme, Uruguay is located in the warm temperatures of Western Atlantic. And in particular, Uruguayan waters include at least two ecoregions here depicted: the Uruguay-Buenos Aires Shelf and the Rio de la Plata ecoregion. In the pelagic realm, we have at least limits with three main provinces: the South Central Atlantic province and the Southern Subtropical Front, and an extension of the Malvinas Current system here. So we have given our country, we have a rich biogeographic context with the confluence of multiple ecoregions, also coastal and pelagic. The Uruguayan shelf is relatively wide, it's about 100 miles, and then we have the slope and break and abyssal plains extending downwards offshore. The extension of the economic exclusive zone is about 120,000 kilometers, but we now have expanded the sovereignty in the sea bottom further 100 and stuff kilometers more. So we have a huge marine area in relation to the terrestrial surface of Europe. And of course, we have some presence in the Antarctic continent. Here you can see the Uruguayan base in San Jorge Island in Antarctica. But I will not be dealing with Antarctica in this chart. The main oceanographic process that shape the marine biodiversity in our zone are the confluence between the warmer Brazil current and the cooler and nutrient-rich Malvinas current, producing a confluence zone that sustains a high marine productivity, primary productivity. Here you can see a phytoplankton bloom offshore the Uruguayan waters. In second term, the Rio de la Plata estuary also discharges a lot of fresh water into the area. Here you can see suspended sediment in the Rio de la Plata plume and determine a salinity gradient along the coast. These factors make the Uruguayan shelf and neighboring areas a very high productivity spot in the world ocean. You can see here the red hotspots in primary production here in the Uruguayan waters. And this traducing a high biomass of fisheries, important species, and a lot of other biodiversity. I will be reviewing some coastal habitats. In Uruguay, we don't have mangroves or coral reef in shallow waters, but we have, for example, coastal lagoons, open or enclosed to the ocean, that are home, at least temporarily, of a whole variety of birds. For example, here you can see flamingos that use the coastal lagoon as resting areas during the migrations. We have also a huge stretch of sandy beach, main touristic attraction of Uruguay, and rocky shores that are smaller but conspicuous element of coastal topography. some small coastal island are also part of these coastal systems. We have a nice representation of nectonic megafauna like marine turtles, the main colonies of sea lions, and further nearly 40 species of marine mammals, including whales, at least 500 species of marine fish in the region, but also in coastal areas, some biodiversity spots like mussel beds associated to rocky shores, and species of potential commercial interest, edible gastropods like the large snail, Sidonal snail. We have also some true corals in shallow waters, but they are not very important in generating three-dimensional habitat in the area. At least 50 species of marine birds are also present in the Uruguayan exclusive zone, which is composed in relation to bottom topography, mainly by soft sediment. You have a smooth terrain with mainly mud and sandy bottoms, with only scattered hard substrata available in the bottom. Here you can see, basically, we are talking about sand and mud, nearly the estuary, but mostly soft sediment with little or no consolidated substrata. Further offshore, we have a system of submarine canyons, here depicted, along the continental slope, and associated to some of these submarine canyons, we have detected in 2010 via side-sky sonar these structures in the sea bottom that correspond to a newly discovered deep water coral reef formed by Lophelia pertusa. Here you have a couple of pictures of this species. So we have mapped so far at least 20 coral reef aggregation in deep waters that are, of course, very important from the biodiversity perspective. We have also several pockmarks, gas or fluid scales that are also known to have a very particular benthic biota. So, what is the current status of all this marine biodiversity? You will see that it's very challenging to take response to this question, but let's see some main issues regarding marine biodiversity. First of all, this is not yet published, but we suspect that at least 2 species of large gastropods inhabiting sandy beach are now extinct in the wild in Uruguay. This couple of species, I think that is almost 40 years without any record. So presumably this is regrettably one of the first extinctions from any marine organisms in Uruguay. We'll be talking about this more later. Concerning invasive species, perhaps the most conspicuous is the rapa whale, Rapana venosa, that is present in the Rio de la Plata estuary and Atlantic zones in Uruguay, and you can see here that have this weird interaction with sea turtles that is worth monitoring. The main physical threat to benthic habitat is obviously the bottom trawler fishery. It's still developed in a large portion of the Uruguayan shelf and slope. You can see here coastal fishery targeting the white croaker and offshore fisheries targeting the Argentinian hake using bottom trawlers. This is probably the most direct impact to the benthic or marine environments. In deeper water, we have some scarce fisheries. For example, the red crab fishery that operates in deeper waters in the slope, but they are not very developed so far. So fisheries are mainly concentrated inshore over the continental shelf. The plastic pollution is another issue of interest, and we are recently beginning to summarize and study. That is certainly a huge impact, in particular to large vertebrates, marine vertebrates, and nekton. And a further issue is the exploration of oil and gas in the continental shelf. Some years ago, the Uruguayan shelf has been, considering for exploration contract with petrol companies, and we have the opportunity in this setting to compile and synthesize available information about marine biodiversity in order to provide some baseline to the management of the oil and gas exploration and possible exploitation. But so far, this process has been discontinued. But strategically, we have to think that perhaps in the near future, we will face a renewed process or impulse of exploration and exploitation of natural resources in the sea bottom, like gas hydrate or free gas or another kind of natural resources associated with the seabed. So it's better to stay aware about this. Talking about the human impacts in the Uruguayan zone, we have some global scale analysis that tell us that nearly 60% of the ocean is increasing under significantly increasing cumulative impact, human impact. In this regard, Uruguay ranks relatively well. It's 35 in the rank among the top 35 in marine ecosystem quality or health. That is a good news. But these pressures are still growing. In a more recent analysis by Halpern et al., the cumulative impacts operating in the Uruguayan marine ecosystem are still growing, albeit reduces in magnitude compared to the rest of the countries in Latin America in general. Another vision is the Ocean Health Index that places Uruguay among half the 221 economic exclusive zones ranked in this analysis, and provides a relatively good assessment of the Uruguayan ocean health. Uruguay is ranking about 67 or so in the Ocean Health Index. This is considering the overall goals of the ocean health impact. But if we focus on marine biodiversity, Uruguay is still performing better according to this global analysis. And you can see here that it's a high score concerning biodiversity conservation, about 89 out of 100, that is the maximum. So apparently, under this global assessment, Uruguay is relatively in good shape concerning marine ecosystems, despite the existence of a number of impacts and threats. What are we doing in Uruguay related to marine conservation? Not very much. Talking about MPAs, we have some 6 recently established MPA that contains a tiny fraction of marine coastal habitat. We think that is not enough to ensure some kind of significant conservation actions in Uruguayan waters. Some of these areas have terrestrial portion and marine portions, but generally the marine portion are too small for effective management, and there is no clear management plan from the marine section of these areas. There are other kind of protection schemes, like the National Fisheries Institute ecosystem-based fisheries management areas that work with artisanal fishermen in order to sustainably manage the coastal fisheries, but these are not strictly MPAs. However, we have some fishery regulation, like closed area from bottom trawl or other extractive fisheries operation. No, we have large portion of the shelf that are closed during some season of the year, but also a coastal fringe that in which the bottom trawl are prohibited. Okay, so if not, these are not strictly MPAs. They also protect some significant portion of the habitat during at least some portion of the time. This can be seen to to expand in the fishery of the white croaker, anchoita, or the Argentinian hake. We have several closed areas in the Uruguayan-Argentinian common fishery zone, targeting different fisheries species in different seasons of the years. Okay, this being said, what are the prospects? We would like to see an expansion of MPA and marine protection. And we have some hopes that the newly developed national plan from the Sustainable Development that includes specifically some goals related to the marine environment that is explicit in this national policy. So our goal, next goal, 2030, we hope that the marine space will be adequately management, incorporating more conservation areas and more sustainable management measures. We hope that this will be achieved by in this decade, the ocean decade, the World Ocean Decade, and we are hopeful that we will reach some major improvements in the near future. Thank you very much. That's all for the moment.
Thank you. We had a problem. We were not able to advise you that your slides didn't flow, but the talk was very clear, so we can understand perfectly, perhaps losing something, but thank you very much. Now I will pass, I will introduce Dr. Alexander Turra, that is coordinator of the UNESCO Chair on Ocean Sustainability. He's of the University of São Paulo, Brazil. Please, Alex.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Flavio, for putting us together. Thank you. It's a fantastic moment to reconvene with you that we met in the past several times. So I'll share my screen here and we'll share the presentation. Just a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Can you listen to me properly?
Sure, yes, very good.
Okay, I will exchange my slide. Please see if it changed.
It's working.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Alexander Turra, I am professor at the Oceanographic Institute of São Paulo University and now the chairholder of the UNESCO Chair on Ocean Sustainability. Flavio invited me to talk about the issue marine policy and conservation of Brazilian habitats. And I choose a narrative or a storytelling to share with you. So I will bring some basic aspects and then bring 3 or 4 examples of how difficult it is to implement marine policies in this regard. So first of all, we are talking about a huge territory of about 5.7 million square kilometers. It's almost the size of the continental part of Brazil. We are talking about 8.5 million square kilometers in the land and a huge area in the sea. This area corresponds to the territorial sea, to economic exclusive zone, and to the continental shelf, the extended continental shelf. So there are several opportunities there, but we have important commitments to manage and to keep this area healthy, safe, clean, resilient, and productive. But we are facing several threats that act in a cumulative way, which degrade these environments. In this study, we can see that there is no area in the ocean that where we can find any or no signal of the human activity. So we have problems. We have different problems that can be seen by the consequences of the human activities, of the interests of the human society in the ocean or in the coastal zone. So we are degrading habitats like mangroves to produce or to install enterprises or developments, industrial developments, or shrimp farms. We are losing beaches due to erosion. We are losing fish stocks due to overfishing. We are losing environmental health due to oil spills or atmospheric emissions. We have a lot of litter in the sea and invasive species, as Angelina showed us. So in the end, we have different impact human activities that demand specific responses or policies that need to be implemented in a logic and sustained way in terms of the information that supports decision making. So if you look at the sea or at the coastal area in Brazil, we may have different views. We may have separation of the territory based on the geomorphological characteristics, based on political divisions, considering the states or the municipalities. We may consider a more integrated approach, looking at the large marine ecosystems, or even the ecoregions described by Spalding in 1997. So we may decide which, or we may consider none of these proposals, so that we perhaps might focus on the scale, the spatial and the temporal scale of the processes governing the issues we are interested on. To manage this huge and complex territory, Brazil started in some decades ago to establish policies. I will not go into detail here. It's described in this paper published in Ocean and Coastal Management 3 years ago. We started policies related to the sea in the national policy for the sea resources and in the national policy for the environment. So in the 80s. From there to now, we had the coastal management program and plan and policy in Brazil, and then we structured several different policies that converge. And I will cite two: the coastal management policy and the marine protected areas policy, because they have sometimes conflicts or gaps that we may understand. We need to understand to improve the management and the governance of the coastal and marine zone. So we have policies. This doesn't mean that we have them implemented or that they are being effective in fulfilling or reaching their objectives. This is one example. This paper was published this year. It's the result of a big and detailed analysis we did, looking at one of the tools of the coastal management policy in Brazil, which is the economic ecological zoning. And then we understood, we checked that it is absent in the majority of the Brazilian territory. Only in some parts we have this management tool fully implemented. So we have a big gap in policy implementation that has consequences on the planning of the territory, on the enforcement of licensing when we talk about environmental impact assessment. So there are several consequences that we need to understand. One additional example is in São Paulo state. We have here the coast of São Paulo state and the overlap of two policies, as I mentioned before. We have the coastal zone policy and we have the marine protected area, or the marine protection policy that overlap, as you can see here. So we have here the coastal protection, the coastal management policy, and in the dashed area, the marine protected area of the northern coast of São Paulo state. And here, of the coast of São Paulo, not the northern coast. And then we can see here that we may have conflicts between these policies that are intending to plan the use of the marine spaces. And there is one interesting information that shows us that even the same policy done by a specific governmental body sometimes have produced noises. Like here, we have the zoning in the central coast of São Paulo state and the zoning in the northern coast. And at that time, we did this study. There was a mismatch in this area, so that we called this paper as sewing this blue patchwork, because it's like a patchwork that has some noise in the overlap, in the integration, even within the same public policy. Then here I would like to introduce the term governance. So we are not talking only about management, about tools, for example, but how the decision making occurs. And this has been finished, this paper, to be submitted this year. And looking at the Brazilian coastal management and governance process since the 80s, not the 80s, the 90s, where a very nice instrument or a very nice forum was created in Brazil, which is the Coastal Zone Integration Group, which unifies several types of stakeholders. We identified several periods. So we have there the period one in the beginning of a new approach on coastal management in Brazil. A second period from 2001 to 2012, where we had the expansion of organizational forms and resistances to change. Then in period 3, 2013 to 2016, a phase or a period where we had homogeneity and stability of actors. Then a period 4, from 2017 to 2018, where we had an improvement in stakeholders engagement. And now, since 2019, for obvious reasons, we have a disruption and a critical juncture that opens future scenarios that can be developed depending on the new arrangements we may construct here in Brazil. The same results are shown in this picture, where we have, for example, the emergence of this coastal management arena here until a conservation moment where all the rules were in place, where the stakeholders were used to each other, where new features were not appearing. And then here, between period 4 and 5, we had this big decree that canceled all councils that were not created by law. So it was a kind of hecatomb. And then some of them were created after this rupture. But the one I am talking about, which is called GERCO, or the Group of Integration of Coastal Management, was not it was recreated, but no meeting occurred since this moment. So we have several scenarios to think about how governance in Brazil will occur in the federal level. So there is a diagnosis that we extract from these analyses that in general we have a fragmented sectoral and policy in Brazil with several implementations gaps, and that we need shift in the paradigm. We are looking at the governance of the coastal and marine zone that should not be fragmented or sectoral. And this approach is named ecosystem approach, where we use several interesting inputs, like the idea of ecosystem services. This is one. This picture was built in a small bay in São Sebastião, in the northern coast of São Paulo state, together with the local community, showing all or several possibilities of interpretation, of perception of the importance of the region. So we are talking about scenic beauty, recreation and tourism, and climate regulation, access to the sea. So this is a different or alternative way to look at the coastal areas, and how to improve it is a very interesting approach, so that we can include it in the management and governance of the coastal and marine areas. Another aspect is related to the processes, to the understanding of the scale and magnitude of the processes. Here, this illustration brings the idea of the source to sea approach. So we have sources of pollution, and we have the sea as a receptor of several types of pollution. And this socio-ecological system that unifies ecological and social processes has dynamics that need to be understood to be managed. One attempt to improve this was published last year. We published this paper proposing a different way to interpret the fluxes, the processes, considering what we call transscalar assessment. So we are looking at different scales, different parts of the territory, trying to understand how these fluxes go from one to another. So we separated a big area in São Paulo that's called the macro-metropolitan area of São Paulo, which has the continental zone, the coastal zone, and the marine zone. So that we try to understand how a demand from the continental zone may put pressure in the coastal and in the marine zone. Okay, so this is a scheme that represents all these possibilities of interactions, and we call this diet because this is a diagnóstico integrado ecossistêmico transescalar. Diet is a little bit light. We understand that this can be more, that this can fit better the complexity of the system we need to understand. This is the macro-metropolitan region of São Paulo, and then we may understand that these fluxes are very important. And normally the negative impacts of the demands of society are concentrated in the coastal zone, because we have harbors, infrastructure, we extract resources from the sea, we have pollution concentrating there, and the benefits are spread all around the territory. So this is a nice example of how these processes may apply to the territory, and how it's important to consider these different scales in the governance, in the management of the coastal and marine zone. This picture illustrates how is the complexity of the processes, of the pressures, of the activities, and how it causes problems in the state of an environment and the impacts in the ecosystem services. And this shows us how these different situations led to responses, which are the public policies we need to put in place, we need to create, or we need to integrate. And this is the point we are now. We need to integrate these policies a little bit better, like we are showing here. So we have policies that are focusing the marine zone, the continental zone, the coastal zone, and some that may be applied to this mix, this integrated area considering all these compartments, so that we may have a more integrated, a more functional, or have more integrated and functional policies that can be, in fact, implemented to solve the problems, the threats the coastal zone is facing, the sea is facing, and to create the opportunities to a new phase of development based on the opportunities the sea offers to us. That's the message. So if you would like to contact the chairs, have a look at the webpage. There are several interesting things there, and we may be in contact after this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now, in sequence, I want to introduce Dr. Paulo Horta. He is the coordinator of the group of rodent beds from the Rebentos Network, and he works in the University Federal de Santa Catarina, Brazil. Paulo, please.
So, thank you, Flavio, very much for the invitation, and congrats for this very, very, very nice moment to see again. Very, very, very good friends. So, yeah, will be a nice opportunity to talk about some nightmares and dreams, to talk about threats to Brazilian marine habitats. Well, I will present the main threats that I think we should pay attention to their consequences and potential solutions for a post-pandemic planet. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Ainda não, Paulo.
And now?
Está aparecendo.
Let's see.
Perfeito.
Okay.
So let's do it. Well, first of all, we need to recognize that despite we have a big planet, and we do have, Mother Earth presents a fragile biosphere with around 20 kilometers high in the maximum, considering the deepest sea and the highest mountain. Well, if we compare with the diameter of our planet, something around 12,000 kilometers, well, we are really, we have a huge vulnerability. And in considering that, we need to understand deeply what means threat. So we are talking about dangers, risks, warnings regarding our health, regarding the planet health. So, and we need to change the perspective of words. You see, we need to feel it. At the end of 2019, Diana Buller and colleagues mapped the human pressure on biodiversity across the planet, uncovering the anthropogenic threat complexes, distinguished by different sets of drivers with varying intensities and frequencies. We see here in this map all these warm colors, the red colors close to the coast, well, where the threats are higher. So in these areas, we have our mangrove salt marshes, rhodolite beds, seagrass beds, shallow and deep reef systems. All these potential sanctuaries of wildlife are under high intensity of pressure of multiple stressors, represented by climate change, as we see here, human use, pollution, and of course, alien species, as was very, very well presented to us. And well, it's important to understand that we are talking about stressors present and interacting, impacting wonderful ecosystems. If you had the opportunity to dive in our coast, you will be welcome. We have really very healthy life. Sometimes we have giant formations, like these cathedrals that we found in the southern reefs of the Amazon mouth region. It's something unbelievable what we can see underwater. We are talking about environments where thrive most colorful, dynamic benthic community. They produce beauty, harmonic interactions, goods and services, as Turra said, that even the most, it's quite beautiful, this pic, is even the most famous artists never dreamed something like it. And here we have a huge chemical diversity, a huge microscopic diversity. So everything that we are talking about is quite important. And we have a huge list of threats. Multiple stressors was highlighted by Vanessa Hatch, a colleague from Universidade Federal da Bahia, and colleagues this year. We have threats with different sources, different frequencies and intensities produced in terrestrial, as we see here in the left corner above, and oceanic or marine threats. We can highlight domestic sewage, mining, agriculture, aquaculture, oil and gas exploitation, fishery, fossil fuel combustion, bottom trawling, as Alvar said, mining, and of course we also have threats coming from atmosphere. So, man, we have a big problem in our hand right now. All that produced in unities like our cities, that of course they are present in our coastline, but they are also in the interior of the country. And we are not talking just about Brazil. We are talking about all Latin America. And we need to say we are talking about everybody that have some influence in the Atlantic Ocean. So all this list of pollutants are pressing anthropogenic drivers and sources of these stresses. And as I said, we are connected by rivers. If you are in the middle of the Brazil or in any country of South America, the rivers we have are transporting the pollutants that we produce and bring to the coastline. And the currents are transporting them to different countries. So we need to remember, for example, that the Brazilian government records are not limited to our soccer team, you see, our football team. Our tragic numbers of deaths in this pandemic, can have us an idea about what we can do. Another unprecedented mark is the more than 1,000 pesticides registered since January of 2019. All that with fertilizers are coming to the southwestern Atlantic habitats in the waters of rivers like Tocantins, Amazonas, São Francisco, Paraíba, and La Plata River that we are talking about here with Alvar, for example. So we need to put that in the perspective of a planet that is burning oil, coal, and gas as never did before. So these numbers represent what we burned in the last 5 decades. And this is how much we are burning right now. So yes, we are producing warming planet, or we are changing. Look these graphs that I extract from IPCC records. The last decade was terrible. So the warming is unequivocal. And As well, the ocean acidification produced by this CO2 is start to be recognized as another global stressor, compromising especially calcification process of reef builders, live coral and coralline algae, among other, of course, marine calcifiers. So we need to introduce all this global scenario in the local perspective or regional perspective. Deforestation and fires, for example, that was our reality last year, the Brazilian reality last year, deserve our attention. The 2020 Brazilian deforestation rate is 182% higher than the established in 2009, when we provide some targets to 2020. So our unsuccessful mark represents an emission of 600 million tons of CO2. If we put all of that together, deforestation are open land to more crop production that feed a growing trend of fertilizer consume. Look, the phosphorus trends that we see here in this graph. So all that can be lost in lixiviation, resulting in water pollution. Well, and this water pollution, we will find more problems and chronic problems. This scenario is together with the increased fertilizer use, have more intense process. Well, as consequence, of course, we have a more intense process of eutrophication with consequent harmful algal blooms and growing dead zones. Well, if it was not enough, we need to put on that overfishing. Overfishing is a primary cause of defaunation. And if we remember, this is a bottom trawling net. And we can see here how destructive this process can be. This disturb the bottom. This really is part of a planetary problem, a problem that have a planetary dimension. Look to defaunation. Some fresh results point that global abundance of oceanic sharks and rays, top predators, so with key trough functions, they have declined by 71%. All this chronic process of erosion of our health coastline sometimes meet some acute events that increase our warnings. At the end of 2019, Brazil experienced the worst oil spill event ever. We are talking about thousands of kilometers, contaminate coastline. And of course, contaminating 57 marine protected areas impacted by crude toxic oil. So this is very hard to understand why all of that is happening, and all the time we are saying, man, warnings must be on. And the effects we are observing with our eyes. We are observing changes in community or populations. We are observing change in immigration, in dispersal, in mortality, the decrease of fitness, or even extinction. The effects of ecosystem service like seafood contamination, fishery reduction, compromise of climate regulation, recreational services losses, loss of genetic and medical resources, all that we are losing in our hands or under our eyes. As we observe it in the Amazon or in the Pantanal, the fires, the people cutting our forests, we are also losing our marine forests. I'm talking about coral reefs, but also about forests produced by or built by seaweeds like this sargassum that we have here. Daniel Gorman, with different colleagues, produced this very nice paper that show the reduction of canopy covers in Brazil, in Southwest and in the central coast of Brazil. So we have threats to the blue Amazon, as Turra said. We have threats that we mapped in this paper in 2020. Well, the end of last year was published. The leader of this paper was Rafael Magris. Very nice contribution to this topic, where we have mapped the fishery, different targets and methods of the threats, of course, that they represent. We have the continental runoff impact, the oil impacts from sea, oil, I mean ports, etc., and of course, ocean warming and acidification. So in conclusion, we have a map with our coastal area in red. In other words, with different combinations of different threats. All that are part of our reality. So we are talking about politic decisions. In the last years, politics represent an additional source of more and different threats. But yes, I think we have solutions. As a general perspective, I would like to bring the need to transfer the One Health concept that we see here as a very common symbol to our relation with the ocean, thinking in a transdisciplinary and transnational or multilateral perspective. We have in Brazil this guy, Zé Gotinha, small drop. Well, I want to bring my comfort zone. I'm a phycologist. I work with phycology, with seaweeds. Here, I have some very, very good friends that also work with seaweeds. So to stop our imminent crash regarding the climate and the biodiversity crisis, we are part of a group that is spreading the need for urgent implementation of algal-based solutions, a kind of ABS break. Algal biotechnology can help to absorb different pollutants, can help to produce oxygen, can help to sink CO2, and also it will produce opportunity for a social, economical development with environmental responsibility. So with algal-based solutions, we can solve local and global problems. Here in Brazil, we have this symbol, as I said, the little drop. So even if we start with a little drop, we can transform people. And with that, we can transform our entire society. So in conclusion, I will refresh that we do have main threats: overfishing, ocean warming, acidification, waste and contamination. As consequence, we have loss of marine forests and biodiversity, and harm of main ecosystems, goods and services. Solutions we also have, and I think we need to run fast and together to produce One Health concept, to apply the RRR principle, reduce, recycle, and reuse. And of course, we need to develop algal-based solutions, of course, in Argentina, in Chile, in Uruguay, everywhere, to mitigate pollution and to produce opportunity to our people. That's it. Thanks a lot for the opportunity, Flavio. We need to remember that we just have one planet, we just have one ocean, we just have One Health. Let's do it.
Thank you, Paulo, very much. And I will...
Flavio, just 1 minute.
Yes.
I need to, I remember now, I need to merchandise here. We have a extension project that we call Ecoando Sustainability. Please come to visit us in the YouTube channel. It will be nice to see you there. We will try to communicate. See you later. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Now I will introduce myself. And I have to share my screen. Sorry. Can you see my screen?
Okay, fine.
So, I am Flávio Berques. I am coordinator for education of the Rebentos Network together with Natalia. And I work at the University of São Paulo, and I will talk about education. And this is a big problem too. And we will talk about the knowledge and perception of marine habitats in Brazil. And I want to thank to all collaborators that are already in this together with us. And I also want to thank the collaborators that will enter in our project today, I hope. Well, today we have a focus on the ocean like never before. We are in the decade of the ocean science, and this is a consequence of the problems that we see. And we know, like never before, that the health of the ocean and marine habitats are very linked with the human health and welfare, and are related to all terrestrial ecosystems. And one important point and an important goal of the decade of the ocean is the ocean literacy. And I brought here a definition. What would be an ocean literate person? It's a person that understands the fundamental concepts about the ocean, that can communicate about the ocean in a meaningful way, and that is able to make informed and responsible decisions regarding the ocean and its resources. In short, it's a person that has a critical view of the ocean. When I consider the education related to the marine habitats, you have a big problem because, as you saw in the previous talks, you have the marine environment is huge, and here the classification of Spalding give an idea. You have 4 provinces just in the area we are considering today, and 16 ecoregions. That is this map here. These are the ecoregions. So the question is, anyone of us knows all these ecoregions? And then I will pose a question of how much we all know about our marine habitats. And when I say all, I say, as Tuha said, several actors, the government, I'm receiving a lot of messages, no problems. It's okay. How much do we all know? We think of the policymakers, of the politics, of the students, of the general population, and of the press. So there are many actors that should have knowledge about the sea. And then I will ask you if you do know the rhodolite beds. I was worried because Paulo will talk about the rhodolite beds, but he didn't talk so much. So a question, do you know the rhodolite beds? No, well, we saw that a few people know what rhodolite beds are, even in Brazil. And the rhodolite beds are huge ecosystem, occupying a great part of our continental shelf, as Paulo showed before, from Rio de Janeiro to the north of Brazil. This map shows the continental platform. And what are the rhodolite beds? Environments where the base are marine algae, red algae that are calcified. They look like stones. The upper part that is pink, the surface is alive, but the inner is dead. So we have really a stone. And on these stones, a lot of algae, this is again sargassum that Paulo showed, can grow on this substratum, and this will feed the fishes, lobsters. So these ecosystems, besides being huge, is also very important in terms of economy and in ecological terms, well, and also to the climate changes, as Paulo pointed before. And as I put this question because we discovered that really a few people know what rhodolite beds are. And this began with this big oil spill that was the biggest in Brazil. When this is a heavy oil, not it goes by the bottom, not by the surface, not floats. So it could have a strong impact on the rhodolite beds. And this oil keep coming for some months, and we didn't hear a single time any people talking about rhodolite beds, the word rhodolite beds. And then we came very concerned with this, and we sent this letter to science, alerting people about this possibility and about the existence of the rhodolite beds itself. After this experience, we did some, I say, experiments, studies, small studies, not published, just experiments. And one of them is this one. We asked for the adult public visiting the Syntec Park in São Paulo. Have you two questions? Have you ever heard about a marine habitat called rhodolite bed? Have you ever heard about a marine habitat with such characteristics than saying the characteristics of a rhodolite bed? And no one knew. Both name and characteristics. Another study that Natalia made before us lasted 9 years with students, college students of biology. And along 9 years, different groups, 800 people, more or less the same questions, and no one, again, know what rhodolite bed was. What is very, in this case, more serious because you have students of biology. After this, we decided to do a project, to begin a project of evaluation of the knowledge about Brazilian marine habitats. We based our studies on the habitats suggested, considered more important by the Rebentos network, that is monitoring network of coastal benthic habitats of Brazil. And this have groups of questions here, asking people about if they know the structure of these habitats, the ecological and economic importance, their sensitivities, and the perception of the public about these habitats. And here as an example, we were beginning the study, so what we have preliminary results, but I put 2 questions less similar to the ones we put before. What environments have you heard of in green? And what is the name of the environment you see in the image? We provided a very characteristic image of each habitat. And you can see here that mangroves, rock shores, and sand beaches, people know both the name and correlate the name with the image. To color widths is already different. People know the name but don't correlate with the image. And rhodolite beds really few people have heard and few people recognize on the image. So this is a project we're starting. And so this is the first invitation that I want to do, is to invite you to join us in this project in other countries or even in Brazil, in other parts of Brazil. If you're interested, please contact us. And to finalize, I had another suggestion for acting. I have many suggestions, but this is one that I think is more feasible and very, very important. That's to build a support for promoting ocean literacy on marine habitats. That would be a web page, free for all publics, with layers of complexity. We can start with the first layer with all habitats, just very simple, and then with links go to more deeper layers with more knowledge, integrating countries, not habitats of Brazil or habitats of Argentina, but integrating these habitats, at least in the first moment for the Atlantic and Antarctic oceans, integrating ecological, economic, and ethical perspectives, and highlighting the relationships between marine habitats, health, and human health. And this is as a second invitation for you to join us in this project. If you want to make contact, this is my email, and thank you very much. And now, in sequence, we will start the discussion. So we have two debaters that will do the first questions and contribute to the discussions, that are Dr. Natalia Guilherme Lopes, that is Associate Professor at the Federal University of ABC. It's a member of the Planetary Health Study Group on Education and a co-founder of the Brazilian Citizen Science Network. And Dr. Suzano Ricci, that is Vice Director of Scientific Park of USP in São Paulo, Brazil. So thank you, and I will start. We have 15 minutes for discussion. So I will ask, please, Natalia, do your first question.
Thank you, Flavio. Thank you all for your great presentations. It was really nice to listen to them all. I'll try to make an overarching question so that you can all discuss and try to answer. So the benthic organisms, from the information presented here by you, are under threat related to multi-stressors, both due to climate change and due to localized human impacts, such as pollution and the introduction of exotic species. So although there are policies related to coastal management and we are on the ocean decade, if we look at SDG 14, which is life below water, there is no target and no indicator related to the monitoring of the benthos. So what do you think about this, and how would it be possible to encourage the long-term and multi-scale monitoring of these organisms, considering that the speed of changes is increasing? So, for example, Turra mentioned the transcalar assessment. Could it be a way? Also, do you think it's possible to consider participatory processes such as citizen science in order to achieve this goal of monitoring benthos and empower people to act based on the understanding of the ocean? So I would like to hear from you guys.
May I?
Please.
Okay, I think this is a very important question, Natalia, because SDG 14 is facing some of the caveats that are pressing the sea, that are pressing the ocean, and are pressing all the biodiversity. So we may see the benthos or the benthic habitats when we talk about pollution, nutrients, or marine litter, which is SDG 14.1. When we discuss reduction of or management of fisheries, which are also considered in SDG 14, and when we talk about the increase in the properly managed marine protected areas. So all of them are touching the benthic habitats, not directly necessarily, but they are there. Of course, we need to have indicators that are measuring the effect of these management efforts. And one of these indicators could be focused on the community composition of benthic species, of the benthos, or indicator species, or something specific on the benthos. There are several potential or possible indicators, but they are not being used now. So I think we need to put pressure on that and try to change a little bit more the focus and use more the biodiversity as indicators of these processes.
Can I contribute?
Please.
Well, as Tuha said, I think we have different alternatives to show that we are losing. We are losing everything all the time. But man, after I think I'm working here in Florianopolis for 20 years, and the last summer we experienced a terrible event where a giant dump of sewage disrupted inside our main lagoon. Wow, the consequences were fishing dying, different times, different moments, and well, what the politicians are doing, what the company involved are doing right now, almost nothing. So I think we need to look to the political perspective, and we need to foster this kind of discussions inside academy and bring to this discussion citizens, everybody. I think we need to act in this political perspective and look for economic alternatives. We need to say, guys, we need reduce. We have no time. You see, it's something. I think we have no time anymore to show different animals or plants that are dying. I saw in Caribbean what is the consequences of deforestation, crop production, mining, all that produce a very, very polluted plume of the Amazon River that together with pollution coming from Africa or America, Central America, producing a melting pot of chemical conditions that make possible a bloom of a seaweed. Up to now, it's just a seaweed blooming. Yeah, okay. But man, it's killing reefs in the entire Central America. We are talking about beautiful environments that are dying. So I think we need to, unfortunately, and or not, maybe is necessary, in fact, and we need to talk about politics.
I want to tell that the YouTube is going very slowly with some gaps. I don't know why. At least in two places. We can perhaps wait a minute. Look at
O Paulo ainda no YouTube falando.
Because it's 6 o'clock in Brazil, then everybody goes to internet. 6 o'clock is terrible. And midday is the same.
Very bad. It's completely stopped.
Yep, completely frozen.
We may try to close the cameras. Fortunately, necessary. Luca ainda está completamente parado. Tá... Agora apareceu a Suzana.
solar storm, maybe.
Querem que escreva um recadinho no chat? Que estamos com problemas técnicos e já retornamos? É que vai que não retorna, né? Melhor não escrever nada.
Eu acho que poderia, viu, Suzana? Você faria isso pra gente?
Claro, estou escrevendo, peraí. Já vou escrever.
Uma pena.
Over, maybe you can at least use this moment to ask something. Over, can you listen to me?
Yep.
Man, have you found kelps in Uruguay? Just in
No,
case?
Paulo. No, there are
Not
not
yet?
kelps in Uruguay. We sometimes have found the Gran Pond, tú sabes, la base
Sí,
de fijación
hold fast.
del kelp.
Hold fast, okay.
De Holfat a veces llegan a Uruguay, pero no hay desarrollo de bosque de kelps en absoluto.
Hicimos un modelo
Predictivo.
offshore, un modelo predictivo de niche suitability. Y ustedes tienen entre el sur del Brasil, el norte de Uruguay, en la plataforma, algunas millas distante de la costa, alguna cosa en torno de 20 millas de la costa.
Ajá.
Elevadísima suitability. No sé si ustedes tienen hard substrate there.
No.
Ok.
En la presentación que no vimos, tenemos los mapas. Ves que no hay esencialmente sustrato duro en la plataforma.
Ok.
Y es difícil, no hay ninguna evidencia de que hubiera habido. No tenemos ninguna evidencia.
Que ha habido substrato duro. Volveu. Estamos hablando acá.
Volveu. A lag is very have a very big lag, but it's working.
Let's keep our cameras off or let's turn on?
I don't know. We can try to turn on the camera and see what's happening.
I think it's relevant.
Okay, let's keep off. Okay.
So, Paulo, can you try to finish the answer, or I had to finish the answer?
No, it's just important to remember. I'm not sure if we are talking about the politicians, but yes, I think we need to really take care with our politicians, because man, what we are observing in Brazil the last 2 years is something unbelievable. In fact, we are running back regarding conservation, regarding sustainable uses, etc. So it's something that we are really very worried about. And I think examples that, as we experienced it in Brazil, cannot happen again in the world, in my opinion. It's something that, okay, is one mistake. Everybody come and look to Brazil. You can see what is happening right now. People dying, environmental dying. Everybody is dying. So if we have some responsibility, we must advertise people about that. And yeah, this is my opinion.
Okay, the sound is okay. We can continue. And so, Susanna, do you have a question?
Hello, everybody. It's a big pleasure to be here and learn a little bit with you all. We are almost 6 afternoon, and then I only like to thanks by the great speeches, but I'd like to know what are the main networks involved with conservation of marine and coastal areas, especially in South America, how we can join these research groups, and also as citizens, like Natalia said, that we need to work in this area, how we can be engaged with.
I think this question could be answered by Andrés, Evangelina, and Alvar.
Yes, yes.
Can I answer?
Please.
Please.
Yeah, okay. Talking about marine bioinvasions, I think would be very, very important to have a network between Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, because, you know, invasive species, they don't care about political limits, and we have evidence of many species that can reach Brazil, predicted to be in Brazil. In many species, we are observing many species from Brazil in Uruguay, introduced in Brazil and then Uruguay. They can reach also, and there is no way to, effective management if we work alone. Because, you know, Brazil has the main ports of South America. Santos is one of the most important ports with the maritime traffic the highest, and then spread different kind of vessels to Uruguay and Argentina. And I think I know examples from this Pacific coast, and the different countries along the Pacific coast, they are creating a network to work in marine bioinvasions. So that's something that we need to think about more for the Southwestern Atlantic.
Thank you, Evangelina. Alvar?
Yes, Flavio, thank you, Evan. I was thinking about the South American Research Group on Coastal Ecosystem, SARCE, that joined researchers from all around South America, and we had some pretty decent projects and publication with a lot of points in rocky shore, sample using the same protocol around all South America, but it was regrettably discontinued. It's hard sometimes to maintain the effort of network initiatives a long time. Well, I am thinking now that this could be a good idea to have some kind of network of networks, synthesizing and joining together all the networks currently working in some issue related with marine conservation and biodiversity. I think that there may be several national networks, probably in Brazil, in the Pacific, probably también. We have, for example, a South American working group on mollusk bioinvasion. That is, of course, concerned with marine, but also freshwater and terrestrial mollusk. So there may be a number of networks currently working that are somewhat disconnected, and this will be a good idea to try to centralize this information and create some network of networks. But again, it's hard to gain support from these initiatives in the long term. I mean, thank you, Flavio.
Andrés?
Ok. Eu vou falar em português porque é o máximo que eu posso fazer. Eu acredito que sumamente necesario establecer uma rede de estudos, uma rede de sítios de estudos de longo prazo. Eu acho que a única solução que nós temos para avaliar o quanto de ecossistemas a gente está fragmentando ou está perdendo, ou quantas espécies invasivas ou exóticas estão chegando. Só quantificando, nós vamos a poder sugerir para os governos as tomas de decisões. Eu acho que é uma das possibilidades. A outra é o problema de base é a educação. Então, por exemplo, no nosso caso, um dos principais problemas da salmonicultura, isso passa pelas administrações, pelos governos. Eles não estão capacitados nas tomas de decisões e eles abrem porque têm muito interesse econômico. Então, eles não têm a informação necessária para saber se eles estão fazendo, que tão mal estão tomando as decisões. Então, eles abrem, acontece um monte de problemas que são avaliados pelos próprios governos, porque as leis são débeis, são fracas. Então, são muitas coisas que têm que ser mexidas, mas neste momento eu acho que o monitoramento em sítios de estudo, com medições anuais ao longo prazo, é uma necessidade urgente. Eu acho que essa rede deve ser local e internacional. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Andrés. And I want to say a word about this. I am worried and concerned with this for a long time. I stopped working on this, but since 10 years ago, I'm concerned with several networks working in parallel. And this is a concernment with different methods, techniques. For example, Rebento, SARS, and other networks in Chile. And we are working in different ways without connection. And this is a big problem. And putting money in different networks that should be connected, could be different networks, but should have a connection. And this is a concern of mine, very, very old concern of mine. Well, you are ahead of, you passed the time, more than 6 o'clock. So I will have, unfortunately, to finish the transmission by YouTube. You have a final presentation that is very short of an experiment we are doing to teach in a more I forgot the word, but an educational experiment that will be very interesting for you to see as finishing to our lecture. Thank you very much, and I hope to, if you have doubts, please send to the emails of people. And if you don't have the email sent to me, I will pass to the other people. And thank you very much. Peço do Luca passar o videozinho, então, por favor.
Olá, O meu nome é Raul Tabajara e eu sou um dos responsáveis pela criação da animação Viagem Virtual no Mundo Submarino. Esse projeto começou com a ideia de uma animação onde os espectadores pudessem se sentir dentro de um submarino. E esse submarino seria controlado por um peixe muito inteligente que construiu uma armadura para vir ao mundo dos secos e ensinar às crianças lições de biologia marinha. Antes de começar o projeto, fizemos essas animações em rascunho. Elas nos mostraram a complexidade do projeto, e isso permitiu enxergar pontos importantes, como por exemplo, qual peixe brasileiro deveria ser o protagonista dessa história. Foi escolhido o peixe bodião, um peixe muito simpático, mas que infelizmente está em extinção. A partir daí, foram feitos desenhos conceituais personificando o peixe em um professor gênio. Com sua aparência aprovada, começamos o processo de modelagem 3D. Como o projeto está sendo desenvolvido para fins educativos e será continuado por futuros artistas e estagiários do Parque Cientec, decidimos usar a plataforma Blender como software de criação.